Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Trippi. I'm delighted to welcome you to this virtual book launch. I think you can see on the screen here before you the focal point of our celebration. It's the Sketchbook Traveler, Hudson Valley, published by James Lancel McElhinney with Schiffer Publishing. We're thrilled for everyone involved in this exciting project. I've got my copy here. I'm delighted that James was kind enough to send me one in advance so that I could have a look in preparation for today's event. What we're going to do is talk and look together at aspects of this exciting project. I want to remind everyone to please switch off your phone or any other noise-making device so that we don't have that in the background. This is being recorded, by the way, for posterity, so smile. We have about an hour together. I'd like to thank Jillian Russo, who's our facilitator today. Jillian is normally busy as Director of Exhibitions at Hollis Taggart Gallery in Manhattan. Good to see Jillian after quite a long time. Delighted to reconnect. And of course, James is our star, so we'll be hearing a great deal from him as he moves through the slides. What I thought we might do is just set some context. As I think almost everyone on the call knows, James is a remarkable artist and writer based in New York. And we met, in fact, through the Newington Cropsey Cultural Studies Center many years ago as contributors to their various programs, and we've been friends ever since. In 2018, I authored an article for my magazine, Fine Art Connoisseur, that focused on James's work with his firm, Needle Watcher Editions. I know that many of you will recall that remarkable set of digital prints that he made focused on the Hudson Highlands. And we were excited to promote that as a new step in the way that we look at the dissemination of images that are made in journals. And we're going to hear much more about journals and sketchbooks today from James. In the way of background, I think you probably know that James was born in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and that he studied at Tyler and Yale. He's had a very busy career in making art and teaching art and writing about art in all directions, and he's a valued colleague to all of us. I think I'll leave it there. I don't need to read the CV. It's just enormous. The fact is that the passion for painting outdoors seems to have begun in 1973 when he was at Skowhegan, and he's never let go of that. We're going to hear more about his latest thinking on that idea. Basically, I thought that I might begin by asking James how this project got going, this book that we're celebrating today. If you could just run us through the backstory and show us what you want to show us.
I'd be glad to do that. And actually, the first slide, the image you have now on your screen is sort of the opening to a PowerPoint, which is kind of historical context and other concepts related to this project. But really, the book came about because of a number of conversations I had with Joe Langman at Schiffer Publishing over the years. We had explored the possibility of a number of projects, and ultimately we came to this idea of a kind of coffee table art book that could fit in a backpack. And maybe the next slide shows a little of that here. So, you know, the whole idea that it's very portable, it's as portable as the practice is. The idea of journal painting outdoors is one that has its roots in expeditionary art. And the whole idea is to travel light and to leave no trace. And so the idea that this could be a book that could work either as a gift or as a coffee table book or as a workbook, because it does contain blank pages for people to do their own journaling. And we can speak about the anatomy of the book a little bit later. But let me just start by trying to create a little context for this whole concept. So the idea of traveler artists, the idea of expeditionary artists, goes back 400 years. But it really begins to take hold and it begins to gain momentum in the 18th century when an artist named Paul Sandby in England really turned watercolor painting into a fine art studio medium. And he taught at the military academy at Woolwich, and one of his students was a man named Thomas Davies, who was seen here sketching a waterfall in upstate New York. He, of course, we could we could start with Albrecht Dürer, who was a peripatetic traveler and kept copious notebooks, examples of his work here, or later on, people like William Bartram, who was a naturalist and an artist. I didn't include Audubon in this because everybody knows him. Or Jacques Lemoyne, who was actually here. He was actually in Florida at the end of the 16th century. And the whole aesthetic of expeditionary art has this thread that goes back to the age of exploration and on up through the 18th century. Here we have Charles Wilson Peale excavating a mastodon in Montgomery, New York. And on the right, we have a view of the Hudson Highlands from behind West Point. Also, artists whom we regard as mostly, the painters of monumental history pictures and allegorical pictures, people like Eugene Delacroix, was also a passionate traveler and kept copious notebooks. These are from a trip to Morocco. Back to Thomas Davies, the first white man supposedly to make a depiction of Niagara Falls. And on the left here, we can see my neighborhood under attack by the Hessians and the British in 1776. And this whole tradition of military topographical drawing created the foundation, the terra firma, if you will, for people like Turner, who also worked in watercolor and also had an expeditionary practice, or people like a number of the artists of the Hudson River School, like Cole, Church, Bierstadt, Moran, and others. And the latter was very influential in persuading Congress to create national parks in the U.S. with his paintings of the Grand Canyon of the Colorado and his Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. But this whole tradition of expeditionary art was not just something that was practiced by artists, but it was practiced by travelers on the Grand Tour in Europe. And here we see examples, and this is a sketchbook in the Philadelphia Art Museum, of Captain Joshua Raleigh Watson, who was an English naval captain who spent a couple of years here in the U.S. and explored the Schuylkill Valley and the Hudson Valley, and was able to produce these beautiful notebooks. These were very inspirational. I was not aware of these when I began my own practice, but when I found them, a wonderful book by Kathleen Foster about his work, it really kind of helped reinforce what I was doing. Seth Eastman, who also taught at the Drawing Academy at West Point. Ledger art. As you probably know, a lot of Native warriors who were captured during the Indian Wars of the late 19th century were imprisoned at Fort Marion, Florida, St. Augustine. And in order to keep them occupied, they were supplied with like ledger books and watercolors and colored pencils. And these are these marvelous sketchbooks that they were able to create in captivity are now finally receiving a lot of attention. And of course, this is again an expeditionary sketchbook from the tragic 1911-1912 Antarctica expedition led by Robert Falcon Scott. This is Edward Adrian Wilson, gorgeous watercolors, which were found in, the tent with all of the members of the expedition who had frozen to death. So just a little historical, again, some historical information. The whole idea of expeditionary art was very, very popular in the 19th century among studio artists. So studio artists began to emulate, the military explorers and others who had really created this practice. And we see here a couple of images of this from Harper's on the left, and on the right, this is a painting of a number of American artists, including Kensett and Champney in the White Mountains. And it's really this idea of being out in nature and being connected to it, having a serious engagement with wilderness and open spaces. And these are some examples of the kind of tools that would have been carried. Here's Thomas Cole's paint box. I mean, these are like reasonably portable, but there's still encumbrances. Here you can see a painting of Sanford Gifford. Most of you may know this picture, and you can see the detail on the right that the lid of the box was used as a kind of easel. Where is the trying to advance this? I can't find my mouse. Oh, there we go. More of the material culture. Some gadgets that were used. I don't know if you know about Claude glasses. You would hold them up and like look over your shoulder, and it would be a black mirror, and it would sort of aestheticize your experience of looking at nature. Here's another view of that. And on the top right, you see these Claude lenses. This is the origin of the expression, looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. They weren't all rose-colored, but again, it was to aestheticize the physical experience of vision. And this is kind of my practice. This is sort of what I do in the field. I have a collapsible table, a collapsible stool, maybe a shoulder bag, and often I'll just carry my tools in my travel vest. But the ethic actually is leave no trace, so that for years and years and years, I would travel out into the landscape with a French easel and oil paints and so forth. And it's very hard not to leave some, spill a little turpentine or a little pigment or whatever. But with this practice, I can absolutely be the opposite of an encumbrance on the environment. I can carry everything I need in onto the site and everything away. Turner's watercolor palette. I mean, I just got very interested in the whole idea of this mobile practice. People ask me, are you a realist painter? I say, no, I don't have a style. I have a practice. I'm what is it Kathy calls me? A topo historical pictoriographer. This is, again, more historic equipment. I'll go through this pretty quickly. Now, like watercolor, I want to say a few words about watercolor, because watercolor was not really that convenient a medium to work with in the field until the 1830s, when Winsor Newton decided, discovered that if you add a little bit of glycerin to the paste, the paint with the gum arabic and the pigment, that the color could be activated by the touch of a wet brush. Prior to that, watercolor came in like ink sticks, almost like ink sticks, hard sticks that would have to be ground against a surface. And here you can see the porcelain, this tray here. So you would take these sticks and add a little water and rub to loosen the pigment. Whereas with the addition of glycerin, it allowed the pigment to be activated with a single touch of wet brush. And so that really changed the portability and the practice of watercolor painting. So I want to talk about some contemporary people too. The late Don Nice, who was indeed a very nice man and a terrific artist, did a trip by raft from Newcomb, New York, all the way down to the Narrows in a rubber raft, following the travels of Jacques Gerard Milbert, an artist in the 1820s who came over from France and made that journey, and then went back to France, wrote a book, and illustrated it with his own sketches. Nice used that as kind of his armature for his project. Another artist, this is not landscape, but this artist who's a paper conservator, I believe, at the National Gallery, Charles Ritchie, who does these intimate portraits of his own personal space, his home and neighborhood. And Elise Engler, who's a New York artist who traveled from Kingsbridge to the Battery all the way down Broadway, painting each side of the street, and then ultimately putting them all together as a kind of concertina book, an accordion book. I've seen it. It's quite impressive. And of course, Mark Dion, who is, sort of an ironic postmodern naturalist artist whose famous project was retracing the travels of William Bartram, who you saw earlier. And then there's me, and I've been, since around 2010, working in the journals has been my primary practice. And I've been to, you can see I'm here at the Hudson River, the source of the Hudson River. I'm in Venice, I'm in Hawaii, Joshua Tree, Iceland, Hawaii again, Ecuador, again at Joshua Tree. And here are a few examples. Now, this is sort of what you're going to see inside the book, because after a text, an introductory text, which is, I think, about 20, 26, 27 pages, we have a part of the book which is illustrated with my journal paintings. And so let me see if I can find the one that's there. Okay. Yeah, so here you can see, compare the image on the screen. This is this. And it's accompanied by text. This is what I normally do when I am in the field. I don't just paint, I also write. I keep a written journal as well. So trying to describe in verbal form what I'm experiencing visually. And really the goal of these pictures is not to paint what's there, but to describe what I'm experiencing. And I think that's an important kind of distinction to make. And even at times I'll make maps, and here you can see there's a map of North-South Lake on the left. On the right, there is a treatment of the composition, the same of the composition from Sunset Rock by Sanford Robinson Gifford. And I ran out of pages, so I decided to do this over top of 2 pages that had been used for just writing. So it wasn't a kind of stylistic conceit to do this. It was just, out of necessity. I had the book, 2 pages were blank. I needed to use them, so I kind of cannibalized them. And I kind of like the effect because it creates a sort of palimpsest, and it suggests, in fact, the way I look at landscape, which is like peeling the onion. If I think about J.B. Jackson's words, that he said that landscapes do not occur in nature, but are created when people adapt terrain to their use, is a really important concept, because The landscape is not a fact. It is a construct, and it is what appears when we project our desires upon the terrain. And here we have a picture. This is actually from last week. This was a demo I did at Olana, and you can see exploring the horizon and all of the features along the horizon. We were talking about reading maps and doing research prior to going to a place, so you have some kind of preparation for what you're going to find, and some kind of clear objectives as to what you're going to try to look for, what you're going to try to discover. Mouth of the Sacandaga River, which I did in the company with noted author James Howard Kunstler. Joshua Tree. Now I should say too that this sketchbook traveler book, Hudson Valley, is the first of 3 books that I'm under contract to produce for Schiffer. Volume 2 is going to be the Southwest, and that's going to be mostly New Mexico, Arizona, and parts of California. So this is Joshua Tree National Park. This is White Rock Canyon near Los Alamos, New Mexico. And this work was exhibited at Gerald Peters Gallery last year in a show called Reimagining New Mexico, and is also, the subject of a new limited edition suite of archival pigment prints with a color intaglio print. So that's also being marketed through Gerald Peters Gallery in Santa Fe. And then volume 3 is going to be New England. Here we have a view of the twin lighthouses at Thatcher's Island off Cape Ann at dawn from Long Beach, if you know the place. Iceland. We don't have a book about Iceland scheduled yet, but it'd be a bad idea. Machu Picchu. So, and Schuylkill River. Last year I did a show. In 2018, I had a project of exploring the Schuylkill River from the dam to East Falls, and that became the subject of an exhibition, which I organized with Craig Bruns at the Seaport Museum in Philadelphia. And here we have an image from that series. Last year, of course, I did an exhibition at the Hudson River Museum, which really is, the content of this book mostly. And here again is a view of my practice, like what I'm doing in the field. For those who are interested, I know there's some artists on the Zoom today, so this is for them. So a collapsible table, I can carry everything in and out. It's very lightweight. It's hardly an encumbrance, and almost all the materials I can carry in my pockets. And so if you want to order the book, I know this is from the Department of Shameless Commerce here, this QR code, but it makes it easier. If you're not watching this talk on your phone, you can point the camera of your phone at this code and it will take you to the Schiffer website and to the book and a portal where you can order it. And if we have any retailers on the Zoom, they can reach out to Joe Langman, who is the retail therapist at Schiffer Publishing, and there's his information. And I guess maybe now would be a good time to bring in Joe and hear from him.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. Let's see if we can request. I've just sent ask to unmute to Joe, and there he is. Joe, congratulations to Schiffer.
Oh, congratulations to James. It's all his hard work, and I'm so impressed by the work that he creates and this book. It's it's been years in the workings, and we're just so happy to have it, along with Kathy's book as well.
Absolutely. In particular, I wanted to call attention to some aspects of the anatomy of the book, as James called it. It's 128 pages. It has all those ingredients that James mentioned, but I think it's also very collegial of James to provide appendices about materials and equipment, Hudson Valley resources and organizations, and also a reading list. I think that's great because then people don't have to go hunting through the internet looking for those resources. They can just have it all in one go. And, there are not many publishers who would allocate space for that. The notion of precious space, real estate, these are really valuable to have in a handy form, not to mention the blank pages. Maybe James and Joe could talk a bit about what makes those blank pages in the middle so special.
Joe, you want to go first?
I'll follow your lead, sir.
Okay, well, you probably can't see this at home, but the blank pages following the section of the book that has my works and words, there is an area of the book of what seem to be empty pages. But in fact, on each one of them, there is a kind of watermark, faint text. And they're inspirational texts. One says, "A hill or tree cannot make a good painting just because it is a hill or a tree. Is lines and colors put together so that they may say something." Georgia O'Keeffe. And so I've chosen a number of piquant quotes which are sprinkled through the text, like Oscar Wilde. I always carry my diary. I need something exciting to read on the train. Or here, to learn something new, take the path you took yesterday, John Burroughs. And so quotes like this, so that these are not really empty pages.
Right.
I haven't seen an object until I actually start painting it, Janet Fish.
That's my favorite, actually. I just opened to that. Yep.
I studied with Janet at Skowhegan, so
yes,
I had to put her in. It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see, Henry David Thoreau. So there are a bunch of, we carefully chose these quotes. And I'm just really, I couldn't be more delighted with what, the design team at Schiffer did with this cloth binding, this red binding, this sort of elastic strap that is a closure that's like a sketchbook. And then the end matter, which Peter was alluding to, has several different sections, elements. One is the materials and equipment, talks about, how to dress, what to carry, materials, art materials. Another one is Hudson Valley resources. This is Appalachian Trail, Empire State Trail, Hike the Hudson Valley, Historic Hudson Valley, Sloop Clearwater, all those institutions that are promoting public engagement with nature and history in the Hudson Valley. Also Hudson Valley resources, parks and open spaces. And here, this is a rather long list, 2 pages, but everything from the Adirondack Forest Preserve, Appalachian Trail, Mohonk Mountain House, so forth. And then a reading list. Fran Dunwell's books, Kathy Foster, Kathy Manthorn, Dan Peck, the late David Schuyler. I mean, so that you can really get, you can really sink your teeth into, the history and science around the Hudson Valley.
So, James, we got a charming.
And again,
sorry. We got a charming chat question from Sarah Linda. She asks, do the quotes appear as if by magic or invisible ink once the pages are filled by sketches or watercolors?
Well, I imagine that's the intention, is that they're sort of ghostly images that they're printed, but they're made to look, I don't know, can I get this? They're made to look like a watermark.
Right,
so
exactly.
It's very, very faint. And so, yeah, you're invited to draw over it. But as you're drawing or painting over it or writing over it, you're creating your own palimpsest. You're creating your own onion skin layer. And again, the goal of this book is not to promote a particular technique or a particular style, but instead to promote a practice of mindful travel through drawing and writing in ways that promote environmental awareness, inspire civic value, and encourage the responsible stewardship of natural resources. And I'll quote a colleague, artist Stacy Levy, who did this wonderful installation on the Schuylkill River of colored buoys that rose and fell, were exposed and submerged as the tides ebbed and flowed. And she said, in the film that was made about it was that her goal was to bring people down to the river, and once people had come to the river and had spent time with it, they might grow to love it, and having grown to love it, they might take steps to preserve it. And I think that's a wonderful sentiment. And I would say that my goals are similar. If I can show people how, or by my example, if I can show people how to deepen their engagement with nature and the science and the history and the culture of a place, then they might grow to love it, and they might take steps to preserve it.
Well,
and
James,
so others can enjoy it.
That's fantastic to hear. I think, you and I have talked before about the fact that this intention on your part is not only genuine to you, but also very timely. That now more than ever in this pandemic era, which will ultimately become a post-pandemic era, we have the question before us: how engaged are we going to be as Americans, just to pick on our country for a minute, with nature? So many people have been consoled and recharged by nature this year. And so I wonder if people who might otherwise bypass a book like this will pick it up and want to be more engaged and more experienced in nature, because they've been doing some of that already. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, none of us have a crystal ball, but I'm pretty optimistic. I think that it won't be jump back on the airplane and take your long haul flight for a one weekend vacation.
Right.
I have a feeling there's a mindfulness now.
Well, people have had to slow down their lifestyle, and things are not moving at the same pace they were a year ago because of COVID. The other thing that's happened is that the wildlife is resurgent. I saw a pileated woodpecker in my backyard yesterday. So there was a time as a young child, when I was interested in ornithology, when I would have cut off a pinky to see a pileated woodpecker. But the nature's coming back. We saw all those pictures of the canals in Venice.
Yeah, exactly.
There, and so there's a lesson in all of this. There's a lesson that COVID has shown us that, maybe our habits aren't all that constructive. Maybe it's not just about trying to preserve our own lives, wear masks and practice social distancing, but maybe it's time that we started paying more attention to the environment as well. So Yeah,
well,
and I think also not just, tourism. A lot of tourism involves, somebody driving to the south rim of the Grand Canyon, jumping out, taking a few selfies, and heading for the bar at the El Tovar Lodge.
right.
I think, instead of just heading immediately to the bar, which I love, by the way, it's a great bar, is that spend half an hour at the rim, do some drawings, take photographs, but draw too. Write down your impressions. What's the temperature? What are you seeing? Are you seeing any wildlife? Are you seeing, what's going on around you? Try to figure out where you are.
Absolutely. May I chime in? Chris has an excellent comment and question in the chat column. In reading your introduction in the book, I was struck by the apparent juxtaposition of mindfulness and preparedness, both of which also play off your discussion of the expeditionary military history of the practice. Any thoughts or advice for those of us dedicated to exploring our own literal backyards as opposed to traveling elsewhere? So that sort of piggybacks on what you were just saying.
Well, we just heard a talk from a gentleman who teaches up at Paul Smith's College about climate change in the Adirondacks. And he was saying how important it is during COVID for people to keep a personal journal of what they're experiencing day by day, where they are, like wherever they are. And we don't have to go to exotic locations to start engaging with nature in a deeper way. It can happen on the way to work. It can happen in your own backyard. It can happen in Central Park, where I saw a hen turkey in the ramble, and a bum on a bench said, "What's that, Boyd?" And I said, "It's a turkey." He said, "I knew it wasn't a pigeon."
A revelation.
But I mean, it's just a matter of slowing down, paying attention,
Right.
And I think in response to Chris's question, yeah, I mean, being prepared is being prepared to pay attention. Now, like many people recreationally might want to go out into the landscape to produce a painting. It gives them pleasure. That's great. I'm saying take it to the next level. Let's call it plein air plus.
Mm-hmm.
And, do a little more research into the backstory, know where you're going. And then when you get there, really excavate that experience more deeply than just what it takes to produce a painting. And so that when you come away from that experience, you know more than when you arrived. And this is the other thing, is that I think this practice that I keep trying to develop and I'm trying to share is a very, very good way to transform experience into knowledge and ideas. And that's useful,
Yes,
I think.
absolutely.
So, yeah, the military and scientific roots of landscape painting are not as well celebrated or understood as they need to be. And I'm hoping to do something about that shortly.
Well, we would welcome that. That's great. Absolutely. That's a very important line of thinking.
Well, I mean, we need to get more people involved in the discussion.
Right.
We need to get more people out into the field. We need to get, and it doesn't matter if you don't know how to draw. I mean, think about this. Every person with a high school education in 1870 could draw as well as they could write. That's a fact.
Yeah.
Is that true today? No. There are plenty of people today who can't write in longhand.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why longhand was important was because it allowed the servant to read his master's handwriting. Mm-hmm. Because at one point in time, cursive was the secret written language of the educated elites. And so when people like Horace Mann called drawing an essential industrial skill that improved handwriting and called it a moral force, he meant that it was a way of making people more equal. And Rembrandt Peale, of course, taught drawing and penmanship at the same time. So really, I think if people stop thinking about drawing as making art and just visual writing, then I think it might be possible to take a trust fall and try to do something, try to visually respond to visual experience. And you know, I think that even if you stare at the Grand Canyon for an hour and draw, and what you end up looks like Mickey Mouse, at least the experience of doing that, of having that sort of tactile sensory activity of making marks on a page while you're closely observing something, is going to write that memory more durably onto the hard drive than anything else. And at the end of the day, what's more important is not the drawing you put on the page, but the drawing you leave in your mind. And so that's, yeah.
I think that's absolutely right. And one thing I wanted to ask you about would be, you know, how do we overcome what might be fear among some people that they will look foolish, that they know that with their smartphone, they can take a photograph of the scene and it looks reasonably like it. It's not a professional photograph, but it is somewhere in the ballpark. You're right about the drawing being potentially Mickey Mouse. How do we sort of transcend that to say, don't worry, it's actually about experience, which is the defining word of our current moment when it comes to younger people. That they're not interested in stuff. They want experiences. That's good. And so how do we connect your project and your intention to those sorts of audiences?
Well, I think the beauty of a book is I could be drawing in a book, right? And if somebody comes over, wants to look over my shoulder, I just close the book. It's my space. This is a personal space. This is as personal a space as this, you know? And if you think about it, I don't have one of my sketchbooks. Do I have one here? But my painting journals are about the same size as this.
Right, exactly. It's so easy. It's so portable.
And so the thing is, there's no judgment.
Right.
It's like a visual diary.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm putting it on canvas, it's going to go in a gold frame, it's going to go in a juried show, it's going to get judged. There's no judgment. You're doing it for you. You're not doing it for approval. You're not doing it to learn a teacher's style or technique. You're doing it to improve yourself and to bring you into a deeper dialogue with nature that's going to be personally enriching and informative.
If I may add, that one way of putting that across is being pursued now by James with the Olana Partnership. Underway this month is a series of Sketchbook Traveler virtual drawing workshops, which are being live streamed from the property at Olana. And I think surely there are people seeing a new way to look and think about the landscape they thought they knew so well. Have you had any specific aha moments, James, during this process this month?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think it's, first of all, it's kind of spooky, and it's a huge honor to be doing this, unpacking this at Olana, because Frederick Church, the landlord of Olana, was one of the great traveler artists of the 19th century, inspired by Alexander von Humboldt and that whole tradition, deeply interested in science and history. And of course, the paintings we know, Heart of the Andes and the icebergs and so forth. I mean, these are big, spectacular paintings, but actually the practice behind them, the practice that gave him the authority to produce those, involved him, traveling through the Andes or through, off the coast of Labrador. And, he wrote in his journal, Kathy spoke about this in a Zoom talk the other day, that, he wrote about one of the mules, tumbling off a trail in the Andes, and that a lot of drawings were packed on that mule. So there are a lot of, at the bottom of a canyon somewhere in Ecuador, there are a bunch of church drawings. They're still there. But the perils of being outside. You go outside and all of a sudden you're no longer in control. The studio is like a laboratory. It's a controlled environment. The minute you go outside, and we had every time, we're having the third installment tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning at Olana. And the first two installments, one was November 7th, the other was 14th, last Saturday, was each time we had an equipment fail. I had an iPad overheat, and the other time I had the battery die in the computer, which was sort of a shock. But both times we were able to bounce back. We were able to go to another kind of device and keep the program going. And so I kind of enjoyed that cinema verite aspect of it's like you're really outdoors, and not to plug it or anything, but I did as one of my pandemic projects was to create this steampunk Rube Goldberg array of media and cameras and wireless mics and stuff that I can actually bring out into the landscape. As long as I have bars on my phone, I can live stream solo. I've got a switcher and I've got all this gear, that I bought from B&H, and so it's kind of exciting because, of course, it's the opposite of my practice, because when I'm alone, all I need is a travel vest, and a rock to sit on. But in order to do this kind of a workshop, I have all this equipment I need to bring with me. But I don't need a crew, and during the present pandemic, you wouldn't want to have a crew with you anyway. So, but revelations, I wouldn't say revelations, I'd say affirmations. Yes, all the time. And
good.
And one of the points that was raised was that Olana itself, the grounds at Olana itself, could be considered a work of art.
Yes,
because when church became infirm from the onset of crippling arthritis and was unable to paint, was no longer able to paint with the same facility, he turned his attention to landscape design. And so that whole campus, 250 acres rising 400 feet above the Hudson River, the house and the grounds really is a microcosm of his own artistic vision, and expressed a kind of cumulative aesthetic sense that goes back to the early 19th century rural cemeteries, people like Andrew Jackson Downing, and of course Olmsted, others. So it's a marvelous place.
It's a miracle it has survived intact.
Not just well, it's a great credit to the Olana partnership,
Yes.
and which now under the leadership of Sean Sawyer is restoring the whole campus to its original state, including a working farm. A lot of people don't know that the working farm that church ran was run. The manager of that farm was, son of Thomas Cole. So it's
interesting. I didn't know that.
There's a lot of connection. Yeah.
So
maybe we have a couple of minutes left. We should just open the unmute everybody and see what's going on. And I'm going to stop the share.
Yep.
As long as everybody took a picture of this QR code, we're good.
There we go. Good. Yes. So if there are any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. You can raise your virtual hand, and Jillian and I.
Peter, we have one question from Christina Waters, and she says, Constable noted meteorological climate. Do you make notes about time of day, humidity, atmospheric conditions as you work?
The answer is yes. I also use a Miracle GPS to find my map coordinates, and I use a compass to record my line of sight as well. So where I am on the map in terms of latitude, longitude, also the direction I'm like in which I'm looking or oriented, in terms of the degrees of the compass, yeah, I mean, if there is a specific meteorological event, I will note it. Usually that is expressed by the visuals in the painting, but at times I'll do that. Yeah, at times I'll do that, and I do a lot of research beforehand as well to know where I'm going, and so that when I get there, I'll know where I am, and hopefully, to borrow that idea from Burroughs about if you want to learn something new, take the path you took yesterday. It's like the more the better you know something, the more likely you are to discover something new about it. So, and that's always been a habit of mine as a traveler. If I was going to a new country, I would study the language, I would study the history, I would try to, have some, I would try to be prepared in some way so that I could appreciate the experience more. When I went to Berlin, I wish I had learned about currywurst so I could have avoided it.
I wonder, James, too, as we wait for people to either raise their hand or put something in the chat, how has the pandemic affected or impacted your experience of nature? Obviously, you can't travel. None of us can travel the way we were. And I just wondered how it has affected like your personal practice, relationship.
It enormously. I did during the lockdown in New York before we withdrew to Essex, New York, up on Lake Champlain. Every day for 80 days, I wrote a blog post of a journal painting and wrote a blog post about that particular place or that particular image. And they're all on my website. It's called the Quarantine Traveler. I think it's 80 paintings and 80 essays. And so that occupied me. I also used the time to prosify my journals from the 90s when I was traveling through the South painting Civil War battlefields. And that was really not so much about the Civil War or about battlefields, but about landscape and about the American landscape as scenery, property, resource, so forth. So, and that's a future project I'd like to unpack as a book, so. And, also I had to deliver this and, other things. So yeah, actually Kathy and I were super busy the whole time. So we had no distractions. I mean, we weren't sitting there chewing our nails, thinking, oh my God, what's happening? We didn't worry about, we just hunkered down and worked. And it was a very productive time. Still is. So
it's still underway. Absolutely. That's right.
And we're super busy and I love it. Happily, we're people who really enjoy working more than anything else. So
that's helpful. I wanted to point out, there was a comment, very interesting from Sarah Linda, during James's exhibition last year at the Hudson River Museum. We installed a mindfulness chair in the gallery to facilitate visitors' full engagement with the art. This has been extended into this year's exhibition, Landscape Art and Virtual Travel, mounted in partnership with Art Bridges, in which a number of artists take us into nature in various ways. That's great. Thank you for that note. And the idea of slowing down and being mindful is something I feel we can't stress too much in these hectic times.
I thought that was a great idea, and I Laura's hand is up. Is your hand up, Laura?
Yeah, well, I thought I ought to weigh in.
Please do.
Because I am the curator, the head curator at the Hudson River Museum, where we had James's show. It was delightful to work with him. It was a really interesting the way, I think you said this already, that we wove in our own collection with his art. And sort of, I really like to make connections to that. And I actually wrote notes so that I would be quick. I think we're in a really unique area here where the Hudson River Museum is in Yonkers. We look out at the Palisades. If I was facing the other direction, I would be looking over at State Line Park. And it's all connected. James inspired me to go to State Line Park for the first time. And, the beauty of being in New York City is these things are right here. And I think it's partly why they were protected and why they were one of the first places that got protected, because losing them was within sight of many, many important people. And there's so much wildlife here. We're right in downtown Yonkers practically, and we've had deer and turkeys run in front of the museum and through the back parking lot. And I'm just going to go down the list. Nobody needs a reason to mention Janet Fish. So shame on you, James. I expect an introduction now to Janet Fish. I love that quote. Don Nice, I just wanted to point out later, went up the Hudson in a more larger motorized vehicle and took one of our curators, and it just brings in the community of the whole effort. It can be a solo thing to go out into nature, and it can be a great sense of community. The painting in our collection was painted in front of our curator. And then, I'm always talking about how it's all connected. People painted and they made people feel like they had nature in their homes. Then people were inspired to go out into nature. The article that was written about Glenview Mansion here at the museum when it was being built, it said that you could look out down the line of the rooms and out the window and at the Hudson River as if it were a painting. As if the nature outside was a painting. So it all really comes together. And when we were working on the landscape art and virtual travel exhibit, we actually started it before the pandemic. But during the pandemic, we started doing some more researching into that and beefing up that part of the argument. And we found studies that showed that even looking at art of nature has a healthful benefit on people. So being out in nature has a mental and emotional and a physical healthful benefit on people. But even looking at art of nature also has that benefit. And I think I've probably said enough now. I'm just happy to be here. And I'm so happy to have James continuing to be in our orbit. His sketchbook that he donated to the museum, an original sketchbook, is in landscape art and virtual travel, and it really speaks to that theme.
Thank you, Laura. Those are great comments and observations. I didn't realize that Don Nice was in a motorboat. I thought
on the other trip, I think he wasn't. When he went back up, he went down,
when he went back up.
And then he went back up.
He was a great guy, and admire his work a lot. So anyway,
Absolutely.
Those are terrific observations. Thank you for
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, Sarah Linda.
Yes.
I just wanted to say one more thing as an educator, and James as well as an artist is clearly an educator, that his practice really exemplifies what we the kinds of experiences that we try to build and offer in a museum, where looking at art is really no different from looking at nature, as you were saying, Peter, in terms of immersing yourself in the experience. That's kind of the idea of the mindfulness chair, or the mindful viewer. And he was so helpful, and continues to be so, in terms of providing us with this holistic experience of art and nature, where they are so completely entwined. So I wanted to thank you for that, James, for the art and for the facilitation. It continues to be wonderful to work with you.
My honor and my pleasure.
Thank you.
We have a question from Joseph Sweeney.
Right. Hi. Did you want to say anything about maybe a future adventure in Ireland that we were planning down the road?
Yes, I'm up for that anytime we can do it.
Right.
But Joe and I are old friends from Philadelphia, known each other probably for 30, 40 years. I don't know.
Might be closer to 50. but go ahead.
But we're both of our roots, our Irish roots, are in Donegal, and Joe was extremely helpful to me during my Schuylkill River, my on the water, the OTW project, and
we wandered through Undine Barge Club for a few days there, figuring out.
That was, yeah, the dinner was memorable. So
right,
yeah, that was you know, and actually, if anybody's interested, if you go to the Independence Seaport Museum, and I believe it's still on the website, the On the Water OTW, On the Water, the Schuylkill River. We did a series of podcasts. The first one was with Joe. So,
right.
And those are all streaming on SoundCloud. You can also, if you go to my website, they're also there under netcasts.
Right.
So, yeah, good.
And
yeah,
the reason we were actually planning, I think we were planning to go this when the COVID came down, we had to cancel. I was taking students or classes over to Ireland for the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. And I think James was set up to go with me. And then all of a sudden everything blew up. So we'll go back.
Right. Kathy was going to go to Bogota at the end of May, or I think it was going to be tight. It was going to go to Ireland and then, you know, to Colombia.
Right.
But that's not happening.
Well, surely there's a nonstop from Dublin to Bogota.
Sure,
I would imagine.
Sure there is. So anyway, thanks for that, Joe. I love your ceiling there with all those maps and charts.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So,
Very cool.
No, it's the navigator in me. I have to keep that up there. So.
Any other questions, Peter?
No, I'm just delighted by this conversation. Thank you. I'm suddenly realizing that we're already spilling into our second hour. So thank you, James, and everyone for being here. This is a real celebration.
I see Chris there. How are you doing, Chris?
Hey, thanks. It's an honor to be here, and been really enjoying reading this ahead of time.
I should introduce, that is Chris Prislovsky at Marist College with the Hudson River Valley Institute. So
okay.
And you have a new issue coming your way.
Oh, thank you.
From the Department of Shameless Commerce.
and you have an essay coming your way. So all right. Well,
any other comments?
Rapid.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you again, and congratulations to everyone involved in this success. It's a thrill, and we will definitely spread the word about the publication. We'll look forward to more. Congratulations to James, to Joe, your colleagues at Schiffer Publishing. Thank you all for being here. And Jillian in particular, thank you to you for managing the system so beautifully. There were no crashes. We really are grateful.
Miracle.
And the recording is being made. And if anyone would like it, I'm sure that James would happily make that happen, or would like to, quote from it. That's easy. I actually have someone in mind that I'd like to send it to, who would really be very interested and could probably do some good for this whole set of concerns.
We can just take care of a little housekeeping right now. If anyone has any objection to us sharing the recording in any way, please speak now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, we do plan to make it available.
No, I'm not in the witness protection program, so I don't have anything to worry about.
Yeah.
All righty. Well,
we're more than happy to help promote this wonderful book.
Thank you so much. Have you received your? Oh, you did receive your copy. Yeah.
I'm still waiting for mine. It's in the mail.
Right.
So I'm waiting too. I'm waiting. Can't wait. Thank you, James. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Hi, Jim.
Hey, who's that?
New arrival.
Frank.
Frank Galuska, really old friend. Gosh, I've known Frank for 50 years. That's that's unbelievable, but it's true.
I'm spotted from the dermatologist.
Oh, I see. Well, thank you everybody for coming in, and I would invite any of you to just reach out to me. My personal email is McElhinney@AOL.com, McElhinney. If it were spelled McIlhenny, I would probably own a chili farm in Louisiana and have piles of money, but I don't.
That's right.
So McElhinney@AOL.com, and I welcome any communication from any of you anytime. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye. Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving. Bye, Kathy.
Ciao for now.
Everybody be
That's
well.
right. Thanks again.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.